Նավիկ ջան, դե կամ հաշվես։
Արպայիմ նարգի անունով ցեզի բարիկալուստ բոլորիդ եւ շնորհակալ եմ բոլոր մասնագետներուն, որ ժամանակ արիք եւ բաժաստեցիք մեզի հետ միանալու եւ ներկայացնելու այս կարևոր նյութը։ Արպայիմ նարգը, ինչպես շատերուն ծանոթ է, 31 տարի է վեր գործի Հայաստանի մեջ տարբեր բնակավարներու օգտակար լալու նպատակով մանավանդ գիտության, գրթության, առողջապահության եւ տեխնոլոգիի եւ մեր անդամները մասնակիցներ են տարբեր բնակավարներ եւ գամավոր աշխատին այդ ուղղությամբ իրենց մասնագիտությունը ներդնելու համար։ Մենք ունենք այժմ մի քանի կարևոր ծրագիրներ Հայաստանի մեջ, ինչպես շատերուն ծանոթ է, առաջին կարևոր հարցը մակրասենյակի Արիխանյանի մեջ մակրասենյակի հաստատումն է, clean room, որ պիտի օգտագործվի բոլոր հաստատություններու եւ համալսարաններու կողմէ։ Երկրորդ ունենք այնտեղ ամենամյա նորարարության մրցույթ երիտասարդ գիտնականներու համար եւ այնտեղ նույնպես ով որ բոլոր երիտասարդ գիտնականներ, այսինքն 35 տարեկան եւ վար կրնան մասնակցել եւ ներկայացնել որևէ նյութ եւ այդ նյութերը կստանանք եւ կքննարկեն մասնակիցներ եւ գարժեվորեն եւ լավագույնը կստանա $10,000։ Մինչեւ հիմա ստացած ենք միայն 6 հայտ եւ հուսանք դեռ ավելի կստանանք այսքեվերջ, բայց շատ հուսալի չէ գարձես։ Երկրորդ ցերնարգը ուրեմն թե pedagogan համալսարանի մեջ եւ թե Արիխանյանի մեջ confined light անունով ծրագիր ունենք, որը ուսումնասիրե թե silicon solar cell-երը նոր մոդեցումով ինչպես կրնա իր արդյունավետությունը, efficiency-ն բարձրացնել մինչև 50 կամ 60%։ Եվ pedagogan համալսարանի գիտնականներ ուսումնասիրեն ադոր հետազոտական բաժինը, այսինքն theoretical բաժինը, իսկ Արիխանյանի մեջ ուսումնասիրվի գործնականը, experimental բաժինը, եւ ցարտ ստացած արդյունքները շատ հուսալի են։ Այնպես որ ծրագիր կա, որ այդ տեխնոլոգին զարգացնենք եւ ուղղակի Հայաստանի մեջ տրվի արդյունք այդ ուղղությամբ եւ Artur-ը այդ ուղղությամբ պիտի հավանաբար մեզի օգտակար լա։ Երկրորդ նաեւ ունենք Արիխանյանի մեջ photo multiplier tube, radio frequency photo multiplier tube gospach տեխնոլոգիը եւ թիմը այնտեղ որ աշխատի այդ ուղղությամբ այս տեխնոլոգիան որևէ laser pulse կամ որևէ այդպես electromagnetic pulse կրնա ստուգել, detect-նել մինչև femtosecond ճշգրտությամբ, որը բավական տարբեր բնակավարներու մեջ կրնա օգտագործվել, կփորձենք այդ էլ նորեն commercialize-նել։ Նաեւ ունենք այնտեղ Արիխանյանի մեջ detection room, որ nuclear խնդիրներով կսպավին եւ առավել ունենք անշուշտ Տավուշի շրջանը մեր STEM-R educational program-ը, որ դպրոցներու մեջ STEM education կսորվեցնե աշակերտներուն եւ ուսուցիչները կվերապատրաստի այդ ուղղությամբ։ Այժմ ուրեմն պիտի ներկայացնեմ մեր այսօրվա գլխավոր ղեկավարը Armenia's energy independence roadmap-ը պիտի լա գլխավոր նյութը եւ անգլերենով պիտի խոսվի։ Մեր panelist-ներն են Artur Alaverdyan, Armen Danielian եւ Suren Shatvoryan, իսկ moderator Astghine Pasoyan. Astghinen ուրեմն մասնակետ է she's she's an expert in energy efficiency and environmental economics and a skilled manager for over 20 years experience. She's managed over 50 million fundraising programs and projects and energy efficiency planning and legal reforms, market assessment, investment identification in various sectors of the economy, and developing sustainable energy financing, housing policy, capacity building, residential and public building energy efficiency programs and financing. And Ms. Pasoyan has managed also regional projects funded by various donors in 20 countries. Experience includes also in climate change mitigation, buildings energy efficiency, urban heating reform, building renovation strategies, renewable energy business models, market assessments, design financing, and many other areas. Astghine is a graduate of Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island, and also from the Yerevan State Economics University. Astghine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you. It's an honor. Not only the topic is incredibly important, and a true testament to that is that I'm sitting under candlelight because I don't think this is power outage in Yerevan. This already feels like a blackout. It's been going on. There's criteria to use it to calculate, but the fact that several major settlements are without power is already a true testament to the fact that talking about energy security is a multidimensional topic in this region. And thank you for the opportunity, especially with such distinguished panelists. We're lucky to have this study, and I think we're also lucky with the panelists and with the authors. I'll go alphabetically following their last names. Artur Alaverdyan is a scientist, engineer, physicist, but is also a distinguished entrepreneur and philanthropist and investor, and he's been involved with not only his education in nuclear energy field and also executive MBA, including from École Polytechnique and Rotterdam University. Artur is one of the repats we're very proud of. He came back and invested in Solaron, in the first solar panel production facility in Armenia. And he's also represented in several other businesses in Armenia. But most for today's topic is also one of the co-founders of the FAST Foundation that has looked into supported and initiated the Future Armenian initiative, which has also led a lot of discussion in the energy sector. Next is our colleague Armen Danielian, who's a fellow colleague and teaches with me at the American University of Armenia, and is an energy analyst with focus on regulatory, economic, and political aspect of energy systems. Holds a bachelor's degree from the School of Lausanne and a master's degree from University of Oxford in energy systems. And he's also supported UNIDO and, as I said, Akopian Center for the Environment on issues of sustainable energy, and has also been with FAST Foundation. And I've probably known longest Suren Shatvoryan, as a senior staff scientist with the Energy Research Institute of Armenia, has a master's degree in energy systems and has worked his whole legacy, at least I know more than 25 years of his career in different segments of energy sector research in Armenia, particularly focusing on renewable energy, system analysis. And he's also been a distinguished expert advising various international research projects with European Union, with the US government, bilateral programs, and he was also supporting research with California Energy Commission, and has also been a founder and executive secretary of the Public Council of Renewable and Clean Energy, and has published more than 250 scientific papers. As I mentioned, this is all a wonderfully distinguished panel, and we're happy to discuss these issues with them, but particularly not in general, but particularly dedicating this discussion to the study they recently authored, dedicating to energy independence roadmap of Armenia. While the topic is very complex and multidimensional, I would like to break it down into several elements. First, I would like to ask colleagues to present FAST Foundation and the reasons for initiating this study, the methodology, the rationale, and how was this different from previous studies that have been conducted in this sphere. And then we'll dive into the technicalities. If I may ask Mr. Alaverdyan to introduce FAST Foundation, and as I said, how was the study initiated? What was the rationale and the methodology? What questions were asked and why? Please.
Thank you, Astghine. Thank you, Artur. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce the roadmap. It was presented in May by the team. This Armenian energy independent roadmap was implemented by FAST Foundation and Solaron company together by established a grant, and that was a call to collect a research team to do this work. A few words about FAST Foundation. FAST means Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology, and we are working since 2017. And it was established by me and our co-founders for foster Armenian advancement, science and technology. And we choose some focus to three main direction is artificial intelligence, biotechnologies, and nanotechnologies. And we during this time we established and implemented more than 25 other programs in the three pillars, from education side, research side, and commercialization side. And now we have ongoing two programs. One is a scientific, the name advanced program. This is a scientific grant to we financing and collecting some research group, and with the principal investigator from top universities, and we establishing the combining some for research group, and provide them the scientific grant for 2 or 3 years. And we have ongoing 12 or 13 this type of research. The second ongoing program in FAST Foundation now is established since September, last year September, AI education. Its name is Generation AI education in 16 Armenian schools, and this program aimed to provide high-level education in the AI field. And this is a piloting program. If it will, and it also have possibilities to scale for the maybe whole school in Armenia, and for 11th class and the 12th class also. And after this, we going to provide this type of education for the first levels of universities. This is about FAST Foundation. I would like to begin to talk about Armenian independence, this research. We implemented this scientific or research grant for, and we set the one goal: how to achieve Armenian energy independence for Armenia, and is it possible to achieve this energy independence? Because we are living in the period of huge scientific advancement, of energy transformation period, and we are looking at the huge development of a lot of new technologies in the energy sector, such as wind energy, solar energy, batteries, electric cars, and a lot of things. And this is growing exponentially. If we look for the history, 15, 20 years, it's growing exponentially. And this advancement is some like of energy transition to the new energy landscape over the whole world. So what it's mean for the Armenia, and how we can avoid using maybe the imported resources, oil and gas, or how we can change or transform the energy system to meet this advancement in the whole of world, and decrease our dependence of imported resources and imported materials. Okay, carbon based materials. So it was the scientific grant. It was established by FAST Foundation and Solaron, and it was a call, what is open call to every group can had the possibility to join this program. And we established also the expert group, and the expert group, it choose the group of researchers who made this research. I think it was we made the right decision, and the group worked on this hardly, and for my opinion, very impressive work. And we was prepared research is a 400 pages document. It's in public, is in public access. And this work was finished recently, and in May we presented it during the event in Yerevan. And we talking. So during this, as a result, maybe summary of this research, we have some three scenario of going to energy independence, or how this three scenario is showing the different percentage or different level of energy independence in the 2014. I said about the aim of this research, but it was also the second goal to set up, or maybe to imagine some vision of energy system of the future, and modeling this energy system of the future, and to build some roadmap to achieve this vision. So the roadmap, it need to be include some technological part, which technology we need to use for this. The regulatory part, which regulation from the country side, from the government side, we need to implement. From the infrastructure side, which infrastructure we need to construct, and what is the also the sustainable cost effectiveness of course, cost effectiveness in this during this roadmap, and we have three scenarios, and I think that my colleagues Armen, Suren, and Tigran, they was in a research group. They are author of this roadmap. They will present maybe in details. Astghine. So we can start for Armen or Suren. Suren, maybe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to start by reminding everyone that the invitation to this panel discussion included the link to the report, which Mr. Alaverdyan mentioned is public, the Armenian Energy Independence Roadmap. And it's authored by Dr. Tigran Gnuni, Aram Hartsyan, Armen Danielian, Regis Danielian, Garnik Balyan, and Suren Shatvoryan. And today we have, at least I can see, three of the authors here, and including Dr. Gnuni, who joined us a little bit ago. And as mentioned, there are several scenarios the study looks at, and it also is informed by the energy strategy, energy sector development strategy up to 2040, which was also included with a hyperlink in the flyer to today's event. So if any of you haven't browsed those, you can look those up. So perhaps we can start by looking at the scenarios and the main resources and the resource base that is dictating the scenarios. Mr. Shatvoryan, would you like to start by presenting the technical rationale, the scenarios, and basically the view, and basically what are the factors considering for the decisions to be made when developing a roadmap.
Thank you, Astghine. Thank you, colleagues, for being with us. Good afternoon to the colleagues in the United States, and good evening to all those who are connected from Armenia. Thank you for presenting a general idea about this research. I would like, since the beginning, to stress that this is a high-level study rather than detailed econometrical models considered there. All the studies were based on the appraisals and assumptions that are mostly probable in our situation. The interesting fact is that the study were conducted during the very dramatic changes happening around Armenia. I mean, geopolitical changes. And this was another red card reminder to all of us that we have to think not twice, maybe 10 times more than before what will be the future of Armenia if nothing is changed from the situation that we have today or we had a couple of years before. Yes, the studies like this were conducted earlier in Armenia, but as much as I can remember, no one was called, no one was dedicated exclusively for consideration of energy independence. There is a study considered a least cost of energy sector development, studies that were considering decreasing GHG in energy sector of Armenia or in general, but this one was exclusively dedicated to energy independence, and I don't know how it happened that fast was forecasted the upcoming events, not very positive events to Armenia, and initiated such a research. I have to say that our decision to try to apply for this open competition for developing a roadmap study for Armenia was not easy. It was not easy. We were thinking several days or maybe a couple of weeks, and finally we decided to apply because of having our specific visions that are different from the previous studies. And I have to say that we didn't know at the beginning, we didn't know what will be the result. Everything that we tried to analyze brought to the scenarios as Astghine presented, to scenarios that would be easier for understanding, maybe for the decision maker, for policy makers to understand what options can be considered beside of already known so far. So finally, we decided to apply, and thanks to God, we won this competition according to the criteria that were established by FAST, and I have to confess that the work that was initially considered for half a year finally lasted for 2 years, almost 2 years. And you know how dramatical 2 years we went through at that time. So let me come to our study. I'll try to share my screen to make the presentation visible for all. I think I cannot share. Maybe host can help me with. So, Armenia's energy independence roadmap presentation. I will try to go briefly through the methodology that we applied during this research, and there is nothing new with this methodology. First of all, we tried to understand what resources do we have in order to make it clear what can we do with these resources. Another aspect was understanding if the resources that we naturally have in Armenia are variable resources that connecting to the energy system could bring serious problems.
You can share now, Suren, if you want.
Excuse me?
You can share if you want.
I think I thought I have shared. Let me try it again. Can you see now?
It's a black screen.
Perfect.
Excuse me?
Yes, it's good.
Yes.
Okay, there it comes. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, thank you. So there was an important issue to understand how the power system can cope with admitting bigger, greater shares of variable renewable energy, because this is a real limitation of the resources that we can use. And I have to say that right now Armenia has naturally more resources than it is possible for this moment, than it is possible to accept, to connect to the grid. But of course, there is another good options like independent generators, autonomous generators, and mini grids and microgrids that provide very good option for more generation from natural resources of Armenia, in particular from resources like solar, wind energy, and all other resources that are depending on the weather, on the climate, etc. The next bunch of issues that to be studied are the legislative framework of Armenia, because it is another limitation that should work to develop our resources as faster as possible. That's why we overviewed existing studies, strategies, and roadmaps that were developed earlier, analyzed international experience and technologies to understand what approach will be applicable for Armenia. Of course, the market of energy is the #1 issue that provides our vision, our understanding of the scales that the technologies should develop, that the generation should be expected in the light of available technologies and possibility of their deployment, legislative and regulatory steps that should be made to go forward in this way. The issues of regional integration that already touched upon in the previous studies, and in reality Armenia has made several serious steps, I would say intentions, to strengthen our regional integration. And of course we should be thinking on what sort of recommendations on the further studies should be developed, because this study is high-level study without going into the details, because this way the study would be just everlasting. We would never stop analyzing and studying many important details. But depending on the further necessity, it could be possible, and I think it is necessary to conduct a study on several important directions that will enlighten our chances to reach the independence, to the higher level of the independence in energy. So, and our target was to consider the development to 2040, and based on the initial investigations, initial studies on the resources, on the technical aspects, legal and the regulatory frameworks, our connections with neighboring power systems. There were developed three scenarios that provide forecasts, so-called baseline, accelerated, and aggressive scenarios. After coming to a general idea on the steps that were conducted for analyzing the existing situation, the scenarios have been developed taking into consideration technical issues of renewable energy integration into the electricity network. Because any integration, any enlargement and extending the electricity network should go with consideration of top priority of grid security and reliable operation. Considering these important milestones, there were considered scenarios throughout all the aspects of energy supplies and consumption. On the basis of that, there were created the balances, and through these balances, based on our scenarios, were calculated energy independence coefficients as a projections. Our projections, our scenarios, and our approaches shouldn't be in an isolated manner be done. That's why we refer to the international experience of the countries that are more or less similar to Armenia. Of course, there is no same power systems in the world. Every country has its own specific issues, but in some meaning, analyzing international experience, we came to the idea in what extent we can adopt these approaches, technologies, policies, and strategies that were applied in these four countries like Denmark, Israel, Ireland, and Switzerland. I think with this topic, Armen Danielian, who developed this part, will be will present the research better than I could. Armen, are you there? Are you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm online.
Mm-hmm.
Armenian, Suren, thank you very much for the introduction. I am assuming the choice of those four countries was based on their high level of energy independence, given the lack of fossil fuel resources domestically. So these are very interesting cases.
Right.
I also found that it was interesting in your study that none of them had a strongly comparable structure of energy that could be complementary to Armenia's experience. So you actually had to take fragmented, more granular approach to draw lessons from those four countries' experience. I thought was a very interesting angle. Other issues in the role of regional energy markets, power markets, market liberalization within the country, interconnections, which are kind of the next level. As you mentioned, there's earlier studies. So the power sector potential with what resources we have, the technical potential for renewable energy, the economic potential for renewable energy have been well studied and documented. but you're raising more important questions. Okay, so the potential is there, but is it actually going to contribute to the energy independence? And what are the bottlenecks in this direction? And this is where you ask the questions on the markets, interconnections, flexibility, system reliability, etc. So if you could elaborate on those issues, take over, Armen, if you can, if these are the questions you could address, would be great, please.
Yes, I can talk on this. Well, that also includes the. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So the 4 case studies, Denmark, Israel, Ireland, and Switzerland, they were also taken for this purpose as well, to study electricity markets and so on. Not necessarily because they're always very similar to Armenia, they can be quite different, but the reasons are elaborated in the report. And for Denmark, for example, it was because of the advances that they had with integrating wind power. So they have about 60% of their electricity coming from wind on an annual basis, and another 10% from solar. So it was to see how they were able to achieve this. And each of the countries gave us a bit of different lessons, but one of the common lessons was the role of interconnectors. And that if you want to rely more on local renewable generation, particularly wind and solar, you need to develop your interconnectors with neighboring countries to be able to trade when there is a surplus and to import when there is deficit of power. As you mentioned, there had been some other studies that were done. For example, USAID looked into the electricity market liberalization and gave some suggestions. So when I was working on these sections, I specifically looked into things that had not been covered in previous reports, such as the systemic costs of integrating renewables, solar and wind. What are some of the solutions to those? What is the role of flexibility markets and how they work? So in that sense, this report is quite good because it's quite broader than the previous studies, but it's also complementary in a sense. It looks at the things that other studies have not looked at, more summarizes some of the things that have already been looked at in terms of the regulatory and electricity markets and so on. If there are, I'm not sure if there are further questions on this section, or if we should move on to a different one.
No, please continue. And that's the several elements of the study are looking at the renewables, are looking at nuclear prospects. So I think I'm going to ask to start with the elephant in the room, because there's been a lot of debate around the nuclear agenda in the country, especially given the published information that has been leaked into the media that Armenian government has had negotiations with different country governments, Russian, Korean, Indian, etc., about different prospective technologies, future reactors that could be integrated beyond the current VVR that Metsamor nuclear power plant is using. So let's start with the toughest question, I think, with the most popular and toughest question. What are the nuclear prospects in the light of energy independence? I think it's fair to say that, well, no study has found Armenia's energy independence in the absence of nuclear energy. So, and I think your study finds this to be the fact as well, despite all the pressures from different international organizations. Well, should I even ask that question? Can we be energy independent without nuclear?
Of course not.
Yeah, so our study also concluded similarly, I think, with the previous studies that we looked at, World Banks and so on. The issue is that in power system generation, of course, you need baseline, you need a reliable source of electricity that works the whole time. Now, for countries where that electricity is generated using renewables, that is most of the time hydropower predominantly, sometimes with a combination with geothermal if there are resources. Armenia doesn't have that much of either. Our hydropower depends on annual precipitation. It's not a reliable baseline that can operate at a high level throughout the whole year. And while we have some potential for geothermal, that I've heard numbers around, let's say, 100 megawatts, there are some further studies to be done. It's not on a level to replace, for example, methanol. So given today's technologies that exist and in the near prospect, in the near-term prospects for Armenia to have a reliable baseline, there are pretty much two options: nuclear power or natural gas. And you can see that when nuclear power is shut down in Armenia for periods of refueling or maintenance works, yes, our system, I think, tries to do it during periods of high precipitation, as it was done last year, so you have a bit more water, but much of the burden of replacing it goes on natural gas. And so if by 2036 we do not have the current goal, at least going by the current strategy, the current strategy is to shut down Metamor by 2036 and to have a new nuclear power plant to replace it. So if by that time there is no nuclear power plant, then natural gas will pick up that burden and will become much more dependent in terms of electricity generation on natural gas than we are now. So nuclear is, in that sense, it's not an elephant in the room, because everyone, not everyone, but from all the experts that I've spoken to, at least in Armenia on this topic, I think the vast majority agrees the importance of nuclear. The elephant in the room is, of course, which nuclear technology. And our study does not take the elephant out of the room because we're not qualified to do that. But we discuss the two main, I guess, technologies, which is the large nuclear power plants, which are usually today around 1,000 megawatts, and the up-and-coming small modular reactors, which are typically up to 300 megawatts in terms of power generation. Now, should I go quickly over the two technologies, or how are we doing on time? Let me know.
Yes, please. Absolutely. That's the elephant in the room, because I think the question is highly politicized.
Excuse me, can you hear me well? I think I lost the connection.
Now we can hear you.
Or I did not hear Astghine's.
I think
Yeah.
I also got disconnected. There was, for one moment, I got disconnected and reconnected.
Yes.
So indeed, the elephant in the room is the technology, and unfortunately, due to the times that we live in, it stopped being a technological question, and it's being highly politicized for the mere fact that there's, well, it's not a new thing. Energy has been heavily geopoliticized over the last several decades. So if you could please briefly talk about those two technologies, and I hope we can keep this non-political, since at the end of the day, the cost and the payback and the reliability of fuel supply chains is all that matters, as far as I can understand. And ARPA Institute has dedicated enough time to this topic. There was an interesting panel discussion on this topic with Artur Danielian, comparing the technologies a couple of weeks ago. So let's dedicate a brief window to just talk about those two technologies and to what extent you've been able to analyze their applicability to the Armenian power system.
Yes, so on the slide, by the way, now I can see it also talks about, it mentions thorium reactors. That's in terms of the fuel that's being used. And we looked a little bit into that. That's also in the report. But the main difference between traditional nuclear technologies and small modular reactors. So Metamor, for example, is around 400 megawatts. The two blocks, each of them are around 400 megawatts. Currently, only one is operating. And so Metamor, in that sense, is closer to the small modular reactors in terms of its size. What happened over time is that because of economies of scale, a lot of countries shifted to building larger reactors, so 1,000 megawatts or above, because then it becomes cheaper per unit of megawatt, per unit of installed power. And so today, that's the dominant technology that is around the world, that is being built usually But then there was also realization that a lot of smaller countries or regions that don't have a lot of population also perhaps have a demand for nuclear. And so people started looking into how to make smaller, affordable nuclear power plants. And that's how SMR, small modular reactors, came about. So one of the disadvantages of small modular reactors is because they don't have the economies of scale per unit of megawatt, they tend to be more expensive, at least the projected costs. But the idea is that if these are a bit more mass produced through the learning curve and so on, because some of the parts will be produced on factories, they can become cheaper. The main disadvantage, of course, is the technology is not fully mature yet. There is licensing to be done, and well, nuclear technologies, of course, on paper, they are tested 10, 20, 30 times probably, and there is modeling and all of that. Still, it's not the same as having an actual nuclear reactor running and seeing how it works. So the main disadvantage by far is their technological maturity. If technology becomes mature, there are quite a bit of advantages. One, it's smaller, so you can build multiple reactors and you can build them as your demand grows, adjusting to your demand, and that way your capital costs are not as big. Secondly, their design is simpler. That happened as they were getting smaller. Simply, the design became simpler, and that means there are less things that could go wrong, and so they're in that sense considered safer. Thirdly, because if you have a number of smaller reactors, for example, when you do refueling, you can turn off one reactor at a time, and that way you need less backup. You have more flexibility in your power system. So other things being equal, I mean technological maturity being equal, they are promising to bring quite a bit of advantages, but technological maturity is an issue, and in Armenia, considering that we need a new reactor by 2036, that becomes a question because, well, the old reactors, they take about, let's say, 10 years to build and can often and easily go over time because of delays. The smaller ones, they can be built in shorter time, but we also need to have some time for the technology to mature. I was on a certain meeting by nuclear on discussing nuclear power in Armenia, and there it was mentioned that a rule of thumb is to have 100 reactor years of experience for the technology, meaning it could be one reactor that works for 100 years, it could be 10 reactors that work for 10 years, but typically you want to have some experience. Now, obviously, it's not strictly true because in that case, no new reactor technology will ever come because you always have to start from zero. But still, it's a question of what we prepare for Armenia, what are our safety concerns, and so on. And it's a very technical question, which we as a team were not qualified to go and say, well, we prefer this technology over that. But we discuss in the report in general, what are the implications for energy independence of having these two different types of reactors.
Thank you. Indeed, I mean, the maturity is one, but another thing that came up in the earlier panel was the economies of scale that is also from the mass production. The larger reactors are more frequently ordered, and there's more orders, which bring down the unit cost per megawatt installed, procured, so to speak. And with the SMRs, the market is nearly non-existent. So unless there are batches of these SMRs being ordered to particular vendors that Armenia can pretty much piggyback on, because we cannot start with more than, say, one reactor as a starter, that is the only way we can count on a reasonable price. Otherwise, very often SMRs can cost as much, you know, 300 megawatt can cost as much as 1,000 megawatt if it's a basically custom-made, tailor-made order. So mass production of these, which kind of builds into your statement about maturity of the technology, because the next step, you know, technology maturity, while means it's been tested and operated for a while, but when it matures, it also becomes mass manufactured, which brings down the production cost. For us, it's a critical question, because at the end of the day, if we set aside the political question of who's the vendor, where it comes from, what region, and how geopolitically stable the region is, the golden question is, what is the cost of installed megawatt and what is the cost of generated levelized energy cost going to be, which with the energy poverty that we have in Armenia is the ultimate question. We
I
can
should
by no
also,
means afford.
yeah, I should also note that for people who are not from the energy field, maybe nuclear fuel is of course imported from abroad, but for a number of reasons why we're talking about nuclear is that nuclear energy is considered to be domestic, without going into details why, but it's a standard approach in international practice. And in the report, actually in the section on nuclear, we go into a bit of detail showing what are the advantages of nuclear over natural gas, even though fuel itself is imported in both cases. But there are reasons why nuclear is considered to boost energy security and energy independence of a country.
Thank you, indeed. And perhaps also add that the long-term standing controversy that has surrounded nuclear after Chernobyl accident and the Fukushima accident is slowly winding down with the pressures of climate crisis and the whole international climate community resorting to nuclear as unfortunately the only quick fix to the climate crisis, as the low carbon, zero carbon energy transitional fuel that can be used until we're ready with more energy efficiency and more renewables to take over. That has also kind of eased the pressure on Armenia for phasing out nuclear by the international communities. That is in our favor, certainly. Thank you. So in terms of nuclear technology, yes, please.
Astghine, may I please let please Armen to finalize the presentation, and we will talk or discussion.
Sure.
Because he needed some time for over this one. Okay.
All right. Absolutely.
Thank you, Armen. Go ahead.
To go through the presentation.
Yeah. Please.
I have one question, gentlemen. Shall we keep the presentation on the screen, or because what we are discussing is a little bit different than we can see on the screen? So, what's your?
Well, let's go through the presentation because it gives an overview of the study and the elements, and for the viewers who would be curious to later explore the study, I think this is a good starter.
So then, Armen, please tell me when to change the slide.
Yeah. Okay, so on this slide, you can see we looked into some additional technologies. Again, nuclear technologies, hydrogen and its application as long-term storage, storage for grid management, and some additional solutions, public transportation, smart grid, what technologies there exist, and so on. We have a question in the chat on energy storage and its role, and I think I'll come to it later after go through the presentation. I'll return to the role of energy storage in enhancing Armenia's energy independence. If we go to the next slide. So here's basically in terms of total primary energy supply. You can see on the left the data as of 2020, and you can see that natural gas is of course dominant in primary energy supply of the country. So our energy independence, and today it's not that much different, is around 27%. And then we had three scenarios, as was mentioned earlier: baseline, accelerated, and aggressive, which basically depend on how quickly the technologies are integrated, how quickly they develop. So partly it depends on our efforts, our government's effort, and so on, the regulations, and how quickly grid is transformed. Partly, especially with regards to aggressive scenario, which is the boldest one, it's a question also of how quickly technologies mature, storage and so on, which is of course an external factor, but the faster storage becomes cheaper and so on, the easier it will be again to integrate further renewable power in our grid. But you can see that focusing on accelerated and aggressive scenarios, that we can achieve 60 or 70 roughly % of energy independence in terms of primary energy supply. A lot of this comes from nuclear, but also from higher shares of solar and wind and through that, the electrification of transport, of heating to some extent. So basically, depending on the scenario, we could have of up to almost 3 times energy independence in terms of looking at it through total primary energy supply. If you go to the next slide, Suren. So here are our steps. We divided our steps into 3 categories, and the steps themselves, the roadmap itself, actually is independent of the scenarios. We don't have 3 different roadmaps. We have one roadmap which shows the proposed steps, and then we have 3 scenarios in terms of how the energy system could actually develop. But the steps themselves remain the same. So so in the report you could go through each of them. It gives more description, but basically there are 3 categories. One is direct intervention, which you can now see on the screen, which describes steps that are to be undertaken immediately by government or by the grid operator. So those are the enhancing the grid, building new nuclear power plant, and things like that. On the next slide, you can see regulatory changes. So one of the reasons why we don't have, for example, a step in our roadmap that says install more solar panels, because that's something that is done through the market. And the role of the government here, and the roadmap presents steps for the government, is to prepare a proper regulatory framework within which that can happen. So these steps are about regulatory reforms, about how the markets work, about including such things as regulation on energy waste. So these are things that have to be undertaken to have a proper regulatory field within which we can have optimal development of various energy technologies. And the last category of steps, these are further studies. Of course, we could not cover everything, and there are specific studies which should be looked into more depth, things such as public transportation, looking at different options for low carbon heating, what are the hydrogen storage options for Armenia, what should be grid flexibility mechanisms specifically, how they should be remunerated, and so on. So we also suggest what are some steps to be done in the future. Again, each of these steps is described in more detail in the roadmap. I think that's it. Yeah, and in terms of the conclusion, again, we have the proposed steps, and depending on which scenarios we go, we estimate that we could have up to 72% of energy independence in terms of primary energy supply. And there are several things, again, worth emphasizing: diversification of interconnections, strengthening grid resilience, storage technologies, smart grid solutions, alternative and renewable sources, nuclear, very important. Thermal, we still envision natural gas being used to some extent in transportation, in heating, in power systems, mainly as a backup capacity when there is refueling of nuclear power and things like that. Energy efficiency is important, looking at energy demand, although there is a bit of nuance there. Also, we go into it in the report, but again, it's important. Autonomous networks and microgrids, and electrification of transportation and of heating as well. So that's a quick overview of the roadmap. Again, it's a very big document. It's, I think, over 300 pages long, so there is a lot to look through there. Now, should we go to the questions in the chat, or is there anything further to?
No, could you elaborate? Do you have a question in the chat on energy storage? And I have a couple of questions to some of the technical elements. One on the energy storage and its prospects, its potential for helping Armenia's energy independence. And then there's another one we will follow with.
Yes, so the question on energy storage, so this is from Ruben Lucinian. He asks, what role does energy storage play in enhancing Armenia's energy independence, and how can it be effectively integrated into the country's energy infrastructure to achieve this goal? So I think it's important here to differentiate between 2 types of storage. There is energy storage for managing the grid, and I assume you're speaking about energy storage in the context of power systems. So there is energy storage for managing the grid. Those are lithium-ion batteries and pumped hydropower, so on. And then there is long-term storage where you basically accumulate energy in the summer, let's say, and then utilize it in the winter. So the first type of storage, which is the one predominantly used today, so that's through batteries, through flywheels, and so on, how it can help enhancing Armenia's energy independence, mainly through facilitating integration of variable renewable energy. It helps in grid management, it helps to have higher shares of wind and solar, and insofar as having higher shares of wind and solar helps us to be more energy independent, in that way storage can help us in terms of managing the grid and enhancing grid resilience. If we're talking about energy independence in the sense of accumulating some large amount of energy and then having it as a backup for days or even weeks, we don't have pumped hydropower or hydropower reservoirs to that extent. We don't have such endowment as, for example, countries like Norway and Switzerland. And so there, one of the prospective technologies is hydrogen. It is still a developing technology. It's relatively expensive. But when you look at storing energy for long periods of duration, for long periods of time, then hydrogen could be quite promising. We looked into it in our report. We estimate its prospect in the future. And we estimate that hydrogen could be likely used as a backup for a power system, as a strategic reserve for power system in Armenia, but that will be in the future, probably in late 30s, early 40s, again, depending on how technology develops. But the main role of energy storage in Armenia, if we're talking about the next 10 to 20 years, is through facilitating grid management and higher shares of wind and solar. So that's with regards to energy storage. In terms of effectively integrating it, well, there is of course two components. There is the technical component, which is the actual grid and enhancing the grid physically, having better transformers, transmission capacity, and so on. And there is also a regulatory aspect, which is the flexibility markets. That's very important. Developing the regulatory scheme so that there are different sources of revenue for companies that install storage systems and that utilize them. Armenia also has, we mentioned in the report, some potential for pumped storage. There was a study done in 1988, and there is a technical potential of up to 1,000 megawatts to have pumped storage hydropower, and 450 out of those megawatts are more promising. And so that could be developed, but again, these are not large facilities which could hold backup power for duration of days. These are facilities which could give backup power for, let's say, a period of 7 to 9 hours, and they will be used in managing grid fluctuations throughout the day. So that's insofar as storage goes, and again, we have a bit more information in the report. The second question from ARPA Institute: suppose our research pays off and we get 60% efficient solar panels, which means that the same number of panels will produce 3 times more energy. Would then solar energy produce 75% of the energy in Armenia, or how long will it take for that to happen? So the question is if whether having more efficient solar panels will allow Armenia to have higher amount of solar energy in its power system. My guess is probably not as much, because the main problem that Armenia and a lot of countries are facing with solar panels is not their efficiency, but integration in the grid. And the problem is that when you have one of the biggest problems with solar energy, and we go into this in the report, is what's called autocorrelation. They will all produce power at the same period in time, basically. That's not the same with wind. With wind, it's more diverse. If you install wind turbines in the north and in the south of Armenia, their generation pattern will be independent. And that's why internationally, when you look at countries that have developed wind power, Denmark is the best in that sense. They have 60% of their electricity mix coming from wind. With solar, the best examples to my knowledge are, for example, Spain, where it's around 20-25%. It's much harder to go to develop further with solar than with wind, for the reason that solar panels will all produce power at the same period of the day. And in the absence of cheap storage, which we do not have currently in energy technologies, you don't have anything much to do with that energy. You can try selling it to your neighbors, but the likelihood is that your neighbors will be having the same problem. If they develop solar energy, they will have overproduction of solar in the same periods of time as you are. And so if we could talk about exporting to Iran, of course, but in that case, we're no longer talking about energy independence. Now we're talking about exports. So in terms of energy independence, I don't think having much more efficient solar panels will help us to integrate more solar power in the grid, because the main issue is not efficiency of the panels. It's simply a lack of storage and problems that it generates for the grid system.
Yes, let me to add something about the efficiency of solar panels, and if we achieve the efficiency 60% of solar panel, it will not change the result, because it's about how many energy you can collect from the 1 unit of square meter solar panel. If you but the amount of energy we need to have in consumption and have in the grid it will be the same, because if we think about the for example 3 gigawatt of solar panels or 1 gigawatt of solar panels, it depends how many it will influence only the cost of this which one this power plants, and it will influence on the how many square meter of land or rooftop you will occupy it with the panels. Okay, it will use. And Armen said that if we're modeling the energy system with the solar or wind or other renewables, not stable or variable energies, we need to understand the consumption. When we have the external customer and we can export, okay, we can increase this amount, but it not will influence on our energy independence in our system, because our consumption will be limited. And in this limit, we need to be sustainable, reliable, and have security system without the problems. Okay, so it will be good technology, because there is no such kind of technology in the world now, but it will not change the situation with the modeling energy system.
Yeah, in the absence of chip storage, it will not really help with much.
The storage will influence much more, and the storage will solve this problem, because just now in today's situation in the energy system of Armenia, today we need to develop the storage technologies. We need to start maybe with the small amount, but the electric power grid need this, because we can see a lot of how to say, the peaks during the day or something like that, because the not stable work of some places already is going on. because the solar plants is developing and because the amount is increasing. And
Yeah.
the energy system is have some difficulties with this today.
Yeah. So in terms of specifically talking about percentage, from what I've seen with international experience and some modeling, let's say done by OECD and so on, having beyond 20-25% of solar energy in terms of annual mix in your power generation, that doesn't seem to be likely. Storage will need to develop further to achieve higher numbers. Do we have any other questions, maybe from the audience? Or
While the audience is thinking, can I ask a follow-up question? Again, there is a stereotype around, especially solar energy. The fact that Armenia is abundant in solar energy is clear. Yes, we have a lot of solar days. Horizontal solar irradiation is very high. The solar technology is improving, efficiencies are rising. But you rightly mentioned and emphasized the infrastructure, reliability, electricity markets, regional energy markets in your study. And I think there is already several years of at least growing understanding that there might be a limitation to renewable energy growth in Armenia without regional markets, basically export prospects. Now, the way I read your study and the way I hear this discussion, energy storage is a domestic energy market supply security. So our peak power, instead of evacuating in exports, were actually stored for off-peak hours when demand will rise. Has there been a cost-benefit analysis of, does it make more financial sense? Energy storage is still quite, I mean, it's dropping in price, but it's still quite an expensive technology. Does it make sense to invest in exports or rather invest in storage? Because regional market integration could also mean imports when we need in turn. You know, I'm mindful of the diplomatic issue, whether or not that would be allowed, because that's another elephant in the room that I think your study is trying not to dwell over much. But I mean, we understand there's a limitation to what extent the regional players would let Armenia approach the energy market table. But is there a cost-benefit analysis of export versus storage?
I don't think we have done cost-benefit analysis of export versus storage. And I think I too, coming more from economics perspective, that's why we suggest to have these markets for flexibility and so on, because there needs to be a study done of what is the value of that flexibility that can come from storage for Armenia's power systems. And once you have a more market-based approach, because it's not an either-or, right? There is marginal benefit from storage to flexibility and from exports. So it's a question that I think has to be decided by the markets that will give appropriate signals for investments. For sure, it's not zero for domestic, right? The value, the benefit, nor is it zero for exports. It's just finding the optimal ratio.
Thank you.
I should mention that I've talked to one person who has a solar plant in Armenia. And I asked, would they be prepared to invest into storage if they got higher prices in the evening from selling their power? And that person said yes. So there's certainly one of the issues with solar is, of course, many of the solar power plants that had been built in Armenia were built with what's called power purchase agreements, where they get a fixed price regardless of the time at which they sell. And so there is no price signal in terms of the demand. And a lot of countries in the world, for example, they move to other instruments for regulatory support, such as feed-in premiums and so on, which are more flexible and which allow for better signal in terms of what's the market price of electricity at any given point in time.
Absolutely. Marginal cost-based pricing, so to speak.
Yeah, that too. Mhm.
Cost of generation. Indeed. Yeah, we have that regulatory reform should still be ahead of us, and hopefully we will get to that. And I think that also has a lot of political resistance, because that would mean prices will have to rise for certain times. And that has not exactly been the easiest political pitch in this country over the last years.
We have a question from Ruben Lusignans.
Yes,
But
I was
it
going to
appears-
read that. Appears
Yeah,
that
okay.
investment into nuclear for our energy independence is beyond question, must have, regardless of whom it's whom is funding, sourcing the actual plant. We need people to operate it. What is your assessment of educational programs to train the necessary workforce?
We have not done an assessment of education programs, because that will depend on which model is being built and which country. Typically, of course, we would presume that the country which builds the nuclear power plant also provides training for the workforce, because the language of the operation can be different, the details and all of that. But since we did not go into our study into any specific models and did not make a pick there, in fact, our study only mentions, I think, that the power, we say, well, we suggest 1,000 megawatts in our study, but we say whether that should be done through small modular reactors or a large nuclear power plant, that depends on the technology. So we have not done assessment education program, because that would require knowledge of what is the actual technology, the actual model that is being chosen. I don't know if there's anything to add, Artur.
I can say is Armenia is historically and now strong in nuclear technologies and nuclear physics, because if you considering the scientific scientist power in Armenia, there is a 6,000 scientists, 2,500 of scientists in nuclear physics, because this is one of the reasons to save the power plant, to have a power plant in Armenia, because we need to save the scientific capacity of Armenia in this field. So from the education side and from the people, it's we are more or less good situation, because just we have a problem with the scientists in applied science, and something need to be commercialized. But nuclear physics is a not such a not applied maybe, but just the application of the nuclear physics is a nuclear plant, and we have this. Don't worry about it.
Well, I think there's a standing, the nuclear physics tradition, and we are claimed to be one of the countries that has the strong cadre of professionals, which also gives the system security. And MAGATE has repeatedly evaluated Armenia very high on that edge, except I'm getting a little skeptical lately as to the change of generation of the younger professionals coming into the sector. I was looking at the Polytechnical University website the other day. I couldn't find a single profession or degree that offers anything with the word nuclear in the degree program. So this was literally a couple of days ago. I was trying to look up the faculties, the departments, and the chairs. And we may be asking ourselves a question if we don't worry about it in the future. But I agree, maintaining the nuclear tradition, nuclear physics tradition is a legacy. And even for just that reason, we need to have the nuclear. I very much share this opinion, Artur. We have a question from Huriel Ezyan, if I may. What is the situation at present regarding wind energy? What are the pros and cons? Suren, would you like to take this question? I know the Energy Research Institute has looked at wind power potential numerous different studies, and this was also one of the issues reviewed in the roadmap.
Until the recent time, there was an opinion based on several researchers and assessments of wind resource of Armenia that the maximum technically available potential for wind energy is around or is between 450 to 500 megawatts of installed capacity. In our study, we use another approach that has been made by one of our team members, Danielian, that collected solid experience during his work in Denmark. By the way, he's a physicist by his background, but he has very good experience with assessment, with evaluation of wind potential. And in his part of study, he just based on the openly available sources for evaluation, he come to a result that is several times higher than the idea that we have so far. But at the same time, right now in Armenia, under the financing of Asian Development Bank, there is a study, there is an ongoing study for wind potential that has to define, if I'm not mistaken, 5 areas, wind-rich areas in Armenia that will be after evaluation will be sold for investors the lowest offered tariff, as something has been done with solar energy a couple of years ago. We'll see if it is true that Armenia has only about 500 megawatts of installed capacity potential or more. My own idea is that Armenia has much more wind potential than it is assumed so far. It could be several times higher, but let's see. Because one thing, if you making your desk study being based on the available network-based sources, and another thing, then several measuring stations are being installed, and they will work for at least 1 year to collect information and finally being analyzed. And of course, the results promise to be much higher than our imagination about wind energy. You can take only as a matter of fact that the researches that have been made 10 or more years ago were measured on the 40-meter high masts. Today's wind power technology doesn't even consider this sort of generators. We're now talking about 2.5, 3 megawatt capacity per unit, which needs to measure the height of 80 and more meters to understand real potential of the wind power. Of course, there are other technologies from space, from LIDARs technologies or SODARs you can install, but the most precise measurements are come from the real masts with installed or necessary measuring devices for wind speed, pressure, humidity, direction, temperature, and all necessary factors that that are collectively provide the real idea that could be analyzed to provide not only technical parameters of wind power, but also they allow you to come to very exact, which is very important, very exact economical evaluation of possibility of installation of wind power, because only one unit of wind mill may cost several $1 million. That's why it is necessary to make very thorough, very exact evaluation, which is hopefully being done. And after 1 year, we will have more holistic idea about wind potential.
If I can also just quickly comment in terms of pros and cons, compared to solar, wind benefits from having more diverse patterns, so it can generate both during day and during night. It also will typically generate more than solar per megawatt of installed power, again, because there is wind much of the time. The issue with wind in Armenia is that often the windy areas are quite high in the mountains. So we're talking about connection costs to the grid can be quite high. Our roads are not exactly friendly to transporting large wind turbine parts. So that adds the cost as well. And they're not very friendly to the birds. But in general, wind, it has certainly its role in Armenia's energy system, although probably less than solar. Typically, internationally looking, wind is most preferred offshore in open seas when there is more wind. But still in Armenia, there are some places which have high wind, and in our study, Danielian did specifically some analysis of specific spots in Armenia, which are very promising and has detailed data of what is the wind generation patterns there and how much could be produced from wind turbines that could be installed in those places.
Thank you. I think this kind of puts the spotlight on the standing question. We've had different investors approach Armenian government signing MOUs for large scale 90 megawatt and over wind power farms, and there was always the controversy of the road access, like you mentioned, high mountain areas. And it's not just the road complexity, it's also the higher the altitude, the lower the density of the air. And the wind speed with the lower air density reduces the capacity to generate power. And unless we have detailed monitoring data backing up the actual capacity to generate kilowatt hours and reliability, we are only talking to the investors on a virtual terms. And just like Suren mentioned, we're all looking forward to more accurate studies that show the commercialization of, rather than the technical potential of commercial viability of the investments. If I may, I want to also emphasize a couple of things that you looked into. They are not very popular, and I was actually a breath of fresh air for me. Everybody looks at renewables, everybody talks about nuclear, but you guys picked out public transport, district heating, and that was music to my ears. because these are, as an economist, I'm not an engineer, for which I apologize. As an economist, these are the most frequently disregarded demand side management areas where Armenia has had enormous potential to save fossil fuel, to reduce fossil fuel dependence, and of course also cut carbon. And you're taking a very nice angle, also looking not at just the technology, but also fuel diversifications for a low carbon solution. If any one of you gentlemen could pick up the question of those two, public transport and district heating, because they were, to me, the most exotic elements you threw into the roadmap.
Yeah, I can talk on that. Yeah, so these were some supplementary measures which actually are hard to quantify, so they are not included in the quantification of what primary energy supply independence could be, and that's why we also suggested to do further research on them. District heating, of course, very popular internationally in places in the Northern Europe, for example, because it helps to transition to low carbon fuels for heating much more easily. In Armenia, that system collapsed in the 90s, and we've relied predominantly on private individual heating since then. So we found some studies which estimated what would be the technical potential for restoring district heating in some places in Armenia. It's not much, it's not the same as in Northern Europe, so that it could replace individual based heating. But still every little bit helps, we guess. So there has been district heating restoration experience in Avan, which technically has been successful, but its electricity price has to be subsidized, from what I understand, for it to be successful economically. So even though we mentioned there's some potential for technical potential, I think it's about 350 megawatts of thermal power. The question whether it's sustainable economically, it should be analyzed separately. In terms of public transportation, that's one way to reduce energy consumption of transportation, of course. But another way that public transportation can help is not in terms of reducing consumption, but in terms of enhancing resilience. So if there is, for example, a shortage of natural gas and so on, so that the country does have alternative modes of, let's say, electrified public transportation, which can provide at least some basic level mobility between cities and within cities. So public transportation can help both with reducing energy consumption to a certain extent, but it can also help provide a resilient system, more resilient system that can work as a backup if there is a shortage of natural gas. So public transportation and district heating, I think there was another one, if I remember correctly, or maybe not, of those additional topics that we looked into, but I can't remember now. But yeah, those were things that have to be studied more deeply and that can provide additional benefits on the demand side. Oh, and energy efficiency was another one.
You also looked at hydrogen, smart grids. Hydrogen was also the one that was, but
well,
this
hydrogen,
is again,
yeah. Hydrogen, I don't think
it's also a
any
topic that the government is exploring extensively. So hydrogen and then energy storage are high on the national energy policy agenda. Interestingly, when we were working on the third National Energy Efficiency Action Plan, we looked at electric transport as a potential storage technology. We even did a little case study where we projected and modeled that, if we had X number of electric vehicles that are charging at night or charging from solar energy generation, what is the capacity of those thousands of little car batteries, EV batteries, be that bus or a personal vehicle? Essentially, that could be megawatts of storage. If there's holistic public policy directing these, for example, marrying electric vehicle charging infrastructure to the solar electric market, and through market liberalization, we can definitely ensure that. it has potential to work in synergy and create more independence and reliability of the system.
One
Well,
thing
I have a
I
zillion
think-
questions, but these people are accessible to me on a daily basis. If anybody in the audience has other questions, we're staying in Armenia. We're going to talk about this every day, 365 days a year.
I think
Also,
yeah,
I
Artur?
think a little comment on this about the heating district. Now is developing a technology for heat pump technology. This technology is more can save a lot of energy for us, primary energy, and it means it's very taking impressive result. And the other side, we need to also there is a third part of energy efficiency. This is a building energy efficiency. The modern construction materials is providing more insulation on when you're building, or when you can insulate your house or something, because the lot of energy you spend only for heating of atmosphere, not for heating the and we need to be to take under attention this part of, and to move whole construction sector, whole building, and maybe reducing the prices for this type of houses. You know, of course, there is a passive houses. There is a you can measure in every country. There is a measurement how many energy spending for 1 meter square of building. And of course, we can reduce more than 2 times, because I don't know the figure for Armenia, but for Europe, they calculated their they can reduce energy consumption, and they can have the 400 billion yearly economy of only with this insulated houses, and using this type of materials in the construction sector.
I would also like to mention something important regarding energy efficiency and in general demand side technologies, is that when we talk about their implications for energy dependence, we can talk about reducing energy consumption, but it's equally important to talk about resilience. One of the things that happens is that policymakers often don't take into account is how people will react to different policies. What often happens with energy efficiency is that you implement energy efficient solutions, and that reduces consumption. But as a result of that, people have more extra money, and they use that extra money to consume a bit more energy because they're at a higher level of comfort, they achieve higher standard of living. And in case of Armenia, I would expect that to be relatively strong because we're a lower and middle income country, so propensity to consume would be quite high. And so it's known in energy efficiency as rebound effect. And so it's important to take into account. And one of the reasons why energy efficiency, as I mentioned earlier, is tricky is that, yes, there has been some experience with UNDP projects and so on of building renovation. And we can say that will reduce energy consumption by 50% in energy heating and so on, in-house heating. But people will use that extra money that is now saved to consume more energy and to live at a higher standard of living. So the correlation in energy reduction will not be 1-to-1, but there will be enhanced resilience because for certain vital services and so on, you need less energy now because you have more energy efficient appliances. So it's a very tricky question of energy efficiency. It's not direct and simple in terms of calculating how much it will enhance your energy independence, but it is important. It can reduce both energy consumption to a certain extent, and it can enhance the resilience of the energy system in general.
Thank you, gentlemen. You raised my last and most favorite question before I even asked it. Energy efficiency. To me, that was what's missing. For me, there wasn't enough of it because energy experts, engineers are geared towards power sector where the generation is, and economists are mainly looking at demand side because that's not an engineering issue; it's an economic issue. And it's not just buildings, although buildings have more than 50% potential to reduce energy consumption. The country on a policy scale, on a central government scale, is completely ignoring industry, completely ignoring agricultural sector, massive transport energy efficiency potential. And that's an issue that if quantified, it's a major energy independence topic because, I mean, we're wired to think about imports of Russian gas, but look at that gas. Most of it is not burned in power sector. More than half of it is burned in residential and public buildings for heating purposes, period. And if we truly follow what Artur said, I mean, through standards, through contemporary lightweight insulation solutions, I mean, Northern Europe that you mentioned for district heating, when we insulate, we do deep energy efficiency, we bring them to class A buildings. After that, the whole district heating has to go down to low temperature heat. This is the kind of impact energy efficiency can have on capacities of heating systems altogether. And especially in Armenia, where district heating has largely deteriorated and we have individual heating systems, the potential for demand-side energy efficiency is larger. I certainly agree with what Armen said. There's, you know, if you save, you also have money saved and you may be consuming more energy. But what we also know, the marginal propensity from monetary policy and microeconomics, marginal propensity to save, it goes also hand in hand with the opposite, marginal propensity to consume. And what we usually project is when they save money on energy, they may consume a little bit more of energy or perhaps have better thermal comfort, which was before compromised or sacrificed. But a lot of that investment will go into medication, bread, other services, which are severely underfunded, especially when we're talking about energy poor that are above 20% of country's population. So these are broader questions, and I'm glad that your roadmap has generated, I think, a lot of answers, but what is, I believe, very valuable is a lot of large questions that should serve as a platform for policy dialogue that inform the government's not only decisions, but the way they should have this discourse with the private sector, with the public sector, and understand these questions in a long run, which unfortunately, since the Ministry of Energy has been merged with the Ministry of Territorial Administration, we're having less of a, you know, solid voice on energy policy. So unfortunately, institutions like FAST Foundation have to take up that role of actually raising the flag and waving the flag, saying we have a public policy issue in energy independence sector, for which I commend you, gentlemen. It's been an impressive piece of work. And if there's no other questions, I'd also like to commend ARPA Institute for continued spotlight on issues of such major sensitivity and painful for Armenia in the long run, and for providing the platform for this presentation. I hope the audience will read the paper. It's enlightening, it's very impressive and interesting, and may raise a lot of questions for you as well. And let's continue to keep the discourse open. Jakob?
Thank you very much, Astghine, and thank you to the panelists, Artur and Armen and Suren. This was a very, very interesting and enlightening discussion, and you had a very nice moderation, Astghine. Thank you, and thank you to the participants. Our next panel discussion will be on the American University of Armenia and the plans for their future. It will be on Saturday, July 27th at 11 a.m. And I'm sorry, today there apparently was some confusion in terms of people not being able to join because of there was Zoom problem that they were having. And I don't understand where that came from, but apparently there were a lot more people who wanted to join, but they couldn't for some reason. So I'm sorry for that. So
And
hopefully
the
we'll see
Armenia
you.
end was disconnected. I apologize. I believe a lot of people from Yerevan would love to be part of this. But
Yes.
as I mentioned, we're under candlelight, so not everybody had enough power.
Yes, and that is also another reason why we should thank you again for finding the right place to join us, you know, because there was no electricity in areas in Yerevan. And so this was great. Thank you very much and hope to see you next in the future. Thank you.
Thank you,
you.
Artur. Thank you,
Thank you.
Astghine. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you,
Okay.
Astghine.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks,
Everybody.
gentlemen. Thank you.
Bye-bye.